Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars. He had been doing this job for 10 years now. His ship, the UES Defiance, was one of humanity's exploration vessels. It was not the biggest or the fastest, but it was his home among the stars. 50 years had passed since humans first met the aliens who ruled the galaxy. The Galactic Council was made up of 7 different alien species. They had been keeping peace across the galaxy for thousands of years. When humans first arrived with their faster-than-light ships, the aliens welcomed them with curious smiles. The aliens thought humans were interesting but harmless. Humans had good technology and could travel between stars, but they did not have the powerful weapons or shields that the older species possessed. The aliens saw humans as younger brothers who needed guidance. Jake's crew was small but loyal. Lisa Park was his navigator, a quiet woman who could plot courses through space better than anyone. Ben Carter ran the ship's engines and could fix anything that broke. Amy Rodriguez handled all communications with other ships and alien worlds. They had worked together for 5 years and trusted each other completely. Today they were checking on human colonies near the edge of known space. These colonies were small settlements where humans were trying to build new homes on distant worlds. The work was hard and dangerous, but humans were good at surviving in difficult places. "Captain," Amy called from her station. "I'm getting a distress signal from Kepler Station." Jake frowned. Kepler Station was a research outpost where human scientists studied ways to make dead planets suitable for life. It was important work, but the station was far from any major shipping routes. Few people bothered to go there. "What kind of distress signal?" Jake asked. "It's weak and broken up," Amy replied, "but it sounds like they're under attack." Jake did not hesitate. "Lisa, set course for Kepler Station. Ben, give me everything the engines can handle." The Defiance jumped to faster-than-light speed and raced through space toward the distant station. The journey took 6 hours. When they arrived, Jake felt his heart sink. Kepler Station was a wreck. Hull breaches leaked atmosphere into space, like bleeding wounds. Debris floated around the station in slow, deadly clouds. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the darkness. "Are there any survivors?" Jake asked. Amy worked at her controls, scanning for life signs. "Yes, sir. I'm reading about 30 people still alive. They're in the emergency shelter." Jake ordered his crew to dock with the station carefully. The docking bay was damaged, but Ben managed to connect their ship safely. Jake and Lisa put on their spacesuits and went aboard the station. The emergency shelter was a reinforced room designed to protect people during disasters. When Jake opened the door, he found the survivors huddled together in the darkness. They were dirty, scared, and some were badly injured. Dr. Greg Hamilton was the station commander. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that now held terrible memories. When he saw Jake, he started to cry. "Thank God you came," Greg said. "We thought no one would find us." Jake helped the injured people while Lisa gathered the other survivors. Slowly, the story came out. 3 days ago, alien warships had appeared around Kepler Station. The ships belonged to the Vorthak Empire, a species known for conquering weaker civilizations and making them into slaves. The Vorthak commander had demanded that the humans surrender their terraforming technology. This technology could turn dead planets into worlds where people could live. It was very valuable and the Vorthak wanted it for themselves. When the humans refused to give up their technology, the Vorthak became angry. They said they would teach humans what happened to those who defied the Vorthak Empire. Greg's voice shook as he told Jake what happened next. The Vorthak soldiers had landed on the station and captured everyone. They separated the adults from the children. Then they began to torture and kill the adults while forcing the children to watch. "They said this was just the beginning," Greg whispered. "They said all human colonies would face the same fate if we didn't surrender our worlds to them. They wanted the children to remember what they saw. They wanted them to tell other humans about Vorthak power." Jake felt something cold and hard form in his chest. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was not soldiers fighting soldiers. This was the deliberate murder of innocent people to send a message. The survivors showed Jake the recordings they had made during the attack. The Vorthak had actually encouraged them to record everything. They wanted evidence of their cruelty to spread throughout human space. Jake watched the recordings and felt sick. He saw human scientists begging for their lives. He saw children crying as their parents died. He saw Vorthak soldiers laughing as they committed these acts. One Vorthak officer spoke directly to the camera. "Let all humans see this," the alien said in perfect English. "This is what happens to those who resist the Vorthak Empire. Your people are weak and soft. You will make good slaves once we break your spirit." Jake sent all the evidence back to Earth immediately. The recordings went directly to Director Helen Price, who ran humanity's Galactic Affairs Ministry. She was the person responsible for dealing with alien governments. Within hours, Director Price brought the evidence to the Galactic Council. The council met on a huge space station where representatives from all the major species discussed galaxy-wide problems. Surely they would demand justice for this crime. Ambassador Zetev of the Altarian Republic listened to the human complaints with what seemed like sympathy. The Altarians were one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. They often spoke for peace and justice. But when Director Price finished presenting the evidence, Ambassador Zetev delivered a response that shocked humanity to its core. "We understand human anger over this tragedy," the ambassador said in his musical alien voice. "However, we must consider the legal realities. The Vorthak Empire filed proper territorial claims for that region of space. They gave the required 72-hour evacuation notice. When humans chose to remain and resist, they became legal combatants under galactic law." Director Price could not believe what she was hearing. Legal combatants? These were scientists, studying how to grow food on dead planets. The people they murdered were trying to make the galaxy a better place. Ambassador Stev's expression remained politely neutral. "The law does not distinguish between types of combatants. The Vorthak followed proper procedures. While their methods were harsh, they technically operated within legal bounds." Other council members nodded in agreement. They expressed deep concern and sincere regret, but made it clear that they would not take action against the Vorthak Empire. Director Price stood in the council chambers and felt the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. Around her, alien representatives discussed the massacre of her people as if it were a minor legal dispute. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm and steady, but Jake Morrison, watching the broadcast from his ship, could see the fury burning in her eyes. "Very well," Director Price said. "You have made the rules very clear to us. If our people are to be considered fair game for torture and slaughter under your laws, then we will play by those same rules." She paused and looked directly at each alien representative in turn. "But know this," she continued. "We promise you this. Any species that harms human civilians will learn exactly what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized." The alien delegates looked at each other and seemed amused by this threat from such a weak species. They had no idea what humanity had been quietly preparing for in the depths of their home system. Ambassador Zetev spoke for the council. "We hope humanity will reconsider this aggressive stance. Violence only leads to more violence." Director Price smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "You're absolutely right, Ambassador. Violence does lead to more violence. We're very fast learners." As the council session ended, Jake Morrison realized that everything was about to change. Humanity had tried to be good neighbors for 50 years. They had followed the rules and trusted in justice. Now they knew the truth. In this galaxy, strength was the only language that mattered. And humanity was about to become very fluent in that language. 3 months passed after the Kepler Station massacre. The galaxy continued as if nothing had happened. Trade ships moved between worlds, diplomats held meetings, and life went on normally for most species. But humanity was changing in ways that no one else could see. Director Helen Price stood in a secret facility hidden deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. Around her, thousands of people worked day and night on something they called Project Homecoming. To anyone who asked, it was a program to protect human colonies and help evacuate civilians from dangerous areas. In reality, it was the largest, Military buildup in human history. Colonel Ryan Bell walked beside Director Price as they toured the underground factories. Ryan was a career soldier who had spent 30 years learning how to fight wars. He had never seen anything like what humanity was building now. "How many ships do we have ready?" Director Price asked. 47 of the new Nemesis-class vessels are complete," Ryan replied. "Another 20 will be finished within 2 weeks. Each one is twice the size of our largest civilian ships." They stopped in front of a massive viewing window. Beyond, the glass stretched a construction bay larger than most cities. Inside, workers were putting the finishing touches on a warship that looked nothing like the peaceful exploration vessels humanity had shown to the galaxy. The Nemesis-class ships were built for one purpose: to destroy anything that threatened humanity. They carried weapons that violated several Galactic Council treaties. But as Director Price often pointed out, humanity had never signed those treaties. The most frightening weapons were the kinetic bombardment systems. These were railguns that could fire projectiles at incredible speeds. When something moving that fast hit a target, the explosion was bigger than most nuclear weapons. The aliens had no idea such weapons were possible. Dr. Kate Thompson joined them at the viewing window. She was a small woman with tired eyes who had once believed science should only be used to help people. Now she was creating weapons designed to kill specific alien species. "The biological weapons are ready for deployment," Dr. Thompson said, quietly. "We have samples that will target Vorthak physiology specifically. Their nervous systems will shut down slowly over several days while they remain fully conscious." Director Price nodded. "What about the other species?" "We have weapons tailored to all 7 Council species," Dr. Thompson replied. 50 years of diplomatic contact gave us plenty of genetic samples to work with. We know exactly how to hurt each of them." While the weapons were being built, another part of Project Homecoming was creating the soldiers who would use them. Major Alex Stone ran the training program for the Human Liberation Corps. These were volunteers taken from Earth's most elite military units. Alex stood in a training facility watching his soldiers practice urban combat. These men and women had undergone genetic improvements that made them stronger and faster than normal humans. They had also received psychological conditioning that removed their natural reluctance to cause suffering. "Remember," Alex told his trainees, "we are not just fighting to win. We are fighting to teach. Every enemy we face must learn that attacking humans brings consequences they cannot imagine." The soldiers nodded and continued their exercises. They practiced techniques that would have horrified most civilized people. These were not methods designed to kill quickly. They were designed to create fear and break the will of entire species. Meanwhile, the Vorthak Empire continued its expansion into human space. They attacked 2 more colonies, repeating the same pattern they had used at Kepler Station. They captured civilians, tortured them publicly, and broadcast the recordings throughout Vorthak space as propaganda. Each attack followed the same script. Vorthak commanders would demand that humans surrender their worlds and technology. When humans refused, the Vorthak would demonstrate their power by killing innocent people in the most brutal ways they could imagine. Commander Nina Foster watched these broadcasts from her office in the Intelligence Division. Nina had spent 20 years learning to understand alien cultures and psychology. Now she was using that knowledge to plan their destruction. Every Vorthak broadcast was recorded and analyzed. Nina's team mapped every Vorthak military base, identified every important leader, and located every civilian population center. They studied Vorthak psychology until they understood exactly what would terrify them most. "They think fear is their weapon," Nina told her staff. "They have no idea what real fear looks like." The Galactic Council continued to ignore human complaints about Vorthak attacks. Ambassador Stev and his colleagues repeated the same legal arguments they had used before. The Vorthak were following proper procedures. Humans who chose to resist were legitimate military targets. But some council members were beginning to notice unusual activity in human space. Ships were moving in patterns that seemed strange for a peaceful trading civilization. Human diplomats were asking detailed questions about alien biology and military capabilities. Ambassador Stev called Director Price to discuss these concerns. The conversation took place over a secure communication channel while Price stood in the command center of humanity's new warfleet. "Director Price," Ambassador Zitev said in his musical voice, "the Council has noticed increased human military activity. Are you planning some kind of response to the Vorthak situation?" Director Price smiled as she looked at the displays showing 47 warships ready for battle. "We are simply protecting our people, Ambassador. Surely the Council supports our right to self-defense." "Of course," Ambassador Stev replied, "but some species are concerned that humanity might be planning something disproportionate." "Disproportionate?" Director Price asked. "The Vorthak have murdered hundreds of our civilians. They broadcast torture sessions as entertainment. What would you consider a proportionate response to that?" Ambassador Stev was quiet for a moment. "Violence only creates more violence, Director. Surely there must be a peaceful solution." Director Price looked at the tactical displays showing Vorthak fleet movements. "You're absolutely right, Ambassador. Violence does create more violence. We're counting on that." After the call ended, Director Price met with Admiral Jake Morrison. He had been promoted from captain after his actions at Kepler Station. Now he commanded humanity's new defense fleet. "The ships are ready," Jake reported. "The crews are trained. The weapons are loaded. We're just waiting for your order." Director Price handed him a sealed envelope. "These are your final orders, Admiral. When you open them, there will be no going back. Are you ready to keep the promise we made to the galaxy?" Jake took the envelope and felt its weight. "They killed our children, Director. They laughed while they did it. They thought we were too weak to respond." "And now?" Director Price asked. Jake's expression hardened. "Now they're going to learn what humans really are." Across human space, the final preparations were being made. Troop transports loaded with Liberation Corps soldiers moved toward their targets. Hospital ships prepared to deal with casualties. Communication networks readied to broadcast humanity's message to the entire galaxy. In the former Vorthak territories, the aliens continued their celebrations. They had declared a holiday called Human Submission Day to commemorate their victories. Vorthak citizens watched recordings of human suffering, while their leaders planned the next phase of their expansion. Emperor Vorth himself appeared in a special broadcast from the Vorthak homeworld. He held up the severed head of a human colony, governor, and spoke directly to the camera. "Let all species see the price of resisting the Vorthak Empire," the Emperor declared. "Humans are weak creatures who cry like children when faced with true strength. They will make excellent slaves once we break their pathetic spirits." The broadcast was received throughout human space. In the command center of the defense fleet, Admiral Morrison watched the Emperor's speech with cold eyes. Around him, his officers waited for the order they had been preparing for. Morrison looked at his watch. In 6 hours, the Vorthak would learn the price of their celebrations. The galaxy would discover what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be civilized. "Signal all ships," Morrison ordered. "Operation Homecoming begins at 800 hours. It's time to keep our promise." Across human space, the most advanced military force in galactic history began to move toward its targets. The Vorthak Empire had taught humanity a lesson about strength and weakness. Now humanity was ready to graduate from that school with honors. The age of human patience was ending. The age of human justice was about to begin. The Vorthak Empire was celebrating. Across their world, citizens gathered to watch the special broadcast that their government had prepared for Human Submission Day. This was their favorite new holiday, created to honor their victories over the weak human colonies. Emperor Vorth stood in his palace throne room, surrounded by the heads of human governors and colony leaders. The camera focused on his face as he smiled with savage pleasure. Behind him, Vorthak nobles laughed and cheered. "Today marks 6 months since we began teaching humans their proper place in the galaxy," the Emperor announced. "These soft creatures thought they could resist the might of the Vorthak Empire. Look how wrong they were." He picked up the severed head of Governor Patricia Wells from New Denver Colony. She had been a mother of 3 who had tried to negotiate for her people's lives. The Emperor had killed her personally just for this broadcast. "Let every human see what awaits those who defy us," Emperor Vorth continued. "Your people are weak and pathetic. You will make excellent slaves once we finish breaking your spirits. The broadcast was being transmitted across the entire Vorthak Empire. Millions of aliens watched and celebrated the suffering of humans. They had no idea that their transmissions were being intercepted and recorded by human intelligence networks. Suddenly, every screen in the Vorthak Empire went black. The celebration broadcasts stopped. Communication networks fell silent. Even the military channels were cut off. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Jake Morrison watched the confusion spread through the Vorthak fleet. Their ships were trying to contact each other but getting no response. Their sensors showed empty space where moments before they had detected dozens of vessels. All ships, decloak, Morrison ordered. Around every major Vorthak world, the human defense fleet materialized out of nothing. The Nemesis-class warships were twice the size of the largest Vorthak vessels. Their hulls were black as space and covered with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Morrison activated the communication system that would broadcast his message to every Vorthak in the Empire. His voice was calm and steady, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson. "Citizens of the Vorthak Empire," he began. "You have spent months watching your military torture and murder our people. You have celebrated our children's screams as entertainment. Now you will understand what we meant when we promised to reciprocate." On the Vorthak homeworld, Emperor Vorth stared at his communication screens in shock. The human ships around his planet were enormous. Their weapons were pointed directly at his cities. How had they gotten so close without being detected? "This is Emperor Vorth," he transmitted on all frequencies. "You are in violation of Vorthak space. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences." Morrison's response was broadcast to every Vorthak in the Empire. "Your Majesty, we are here to fulfill the promise our director made to the Galactic Council. You taught us that strength is the only language the galaxy respects. We are here to demonstrate our fluency." The first phase of Operation Homecoming was not a battle, it was an education. Major Alex Stone led the Liberation Corps as they landed on Vorthak worlds. But these soldiers did not come to conquer cities or destroy military bases. They came to teach lessons that the Vorthak would never forget. Alex and his team landed outside the capital city on the Vorthak homeworld. They moved through the streets with the precision of surgeons and the patience of teachers. Their target was the Imperial Palace where Emperor Vorth and his family lived. The Vorthak guards tried to resist, but human technology was far beyond anything they had seen. The Liberation Corps soldiers moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, at will. Their weapons fired projectiles that could penetrate any armor the Vorthak had developed. Within hours, Alex and his team had captured the Emperor's entire family. They also took every high-ranking official who had participated in the attacks on human colonies. But instead of killing them immediately, the humans did something much more terrifying. They began broadcasting educational demonstrations, using the same techniques the Vorthak had employed against humans. The Liberation Corps systematically captured Vorthak officials and their families. But the humans had spent 50 years studying Vorthak psychology. They knew exactly which pressures would break a Vorthak mind. Dr. Kate Thompson's biological weapons were deployed with surgical precision. At military bases across the Vorthak Empire, soldiers found themselves dying slowly from diseases that targeted their nervous systems. The weapons had been designed specifically for Vorthak physiology. The infected Vorthak remained fully conscious as their bodies shut down over several days. They could see and hear everything around them, but they could not move or speak. They could only lie there and think about what they had done to human families. But the true horror came when Admiral Morrison announced what he called proportional response. His message was broadcast to every screen in Vorthak space with a running countdown timer displayed prominently. "For every human civilian your empire killed, we will execute 100 Vorthak civilians," Morrison explained. "The mathematics are simple and non-negotiable. You killed 847 human civilians. We will therefore execute 84,700 Vorthak civilians. The countdown begins now." Emperor Vorth tried to surrender after the first day, but the humans ignored his pleas. They had prepared for this moment for months. Every Vorthak who had participated in attacks on humans was hunted down, no matter where they tried to hide. Commander Nina Foster's intelligence networks had mapped every Vorthak leader, every military officer, and every civilian who had celebrated human deaths. The humans demonstrated an institutional memory and thoroughness that terrified even their enemies. The executions were carried out with the same methodical precision the Vorthak had used against humans. But the humans were more creative. They had studied Vorthak fears and weaknesses for decades. They knew exactly how to make death into a teaching tool. Major Stone personally oversaw the execution of Emperor Vorth's family, but instead of simply killing them, he forced the Emperor to watch as his children experienced the same terror that human children had felt. The Emperor begged and pleaded, offering anything the humans wanted in exchange for mercy. Mercy? Stone asked, genuinely confused. Your Majesty, we are showing you exactly the same mercy you showed our people. This is what you taught us was acceptable behavior. The broadcast continued for 6 days. Every moment was recorded and transmitted throughout Vorthak space. The aliens who had laughed at human suffering now watched their own leaders and families die in ways that broke their minds, but the humans were not finished. Admiral Morrison announced the final phase of proportional response. For every human colony the Vorthak had destroyed, the humans would eliminate one Vorthak world entirely. The planet of Vorthak Prime had been the Emperor's personal hunting preserve, where he had kept captured humans as living prey. Morrison's fleet surrounded the world and began the most thorough demonstration of human military technology that the galaxy had ever seen. The kinetic bombardment systems fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. When these projectiles hit the planet's surface, they created explosions that could be seen from orbit. The humans did not simply destroy cities. They reshaped the planet's geography. Within hours, Vorthak Prime was uninhabitable. The humans had turned an entire world into a monument to the consequences of harming human civilians. The message was clear. This was what happened to those who celebrated the torture of human children. Emperor Vorth, the last surviving member of his family, was brought before Admiral Morrison in chains. The proud alien who had once boasted about breaking human spirits was now a broken creature who could barely speak. Please, the Emperor whispered. We surrender. We will do anything you ask. Just make it stop. Morrison looked at the fallen Emperor with the same expression a scientist might use when examining an interesting specimen. Your Majesty, we accept your surrender, but surrender does not erase consequences. You taught the galaxy that civilian populations are acceptable targets. We are simply applying that lesson with proper human efficiency. The Vorthak Empire ceased to exist as a political entity within 6 days. Their military was destroyed. Their leadership was eliminated and their worlds were occupied by human forces that ruled with mechanical precision. But the humans did not simply conquer the former Vorthak territory. They reorganized it according to human standards of efficiency and order. The surviving Vorthak found themselves living under a system that was technically humane but psychologically crushing. They were fed, housed, and protected, but they were also controlled in ways that made their former empire seem like freedom. The humans had studied their psychology so thoroughly that they could predict and prevent any form of resistance before it even formed. Admiral Morrison's final broadcast to the galaxy was simple and direct. The Vorthak Empire chose to make human civilians into acceptable targets. We have responded proportionally, according to the legal precedents established by the Galactic Council. Let this serve as an educational demonstration for any other species considering similar actions. The promise had been kept. The galaxy would never again mistake human patience for human weakness. News of the Vorthak Empire's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major species had received detailed reports about what the humans had done. The reports came with video recordings that most aliens wished they had never seen. Ambassador Stev sat in his private chambers on the Galactic Council station, watching the footage that his intelligence officers had gathered from former Vorthak space. His hands shook as he observed the systematic way humans had dismantled an entire civilization. The recording showed human soldiers working with the precision of surgeons and the patience of teachers. They did not simply kill their enemies. They demonstrated human creativity in ways that disturbed even the most hardened warriors among the galaxy's military species. On his desk lay reports from the Krellian war clans, a species famous for their skill in battle. Even these professional soldiers were horrified by what they had witnessed. The Krellian commander had written, "Humans do not fight wars. They perform surgery on entire civilizations." The most disturbing aspect was not the violence itself, but the methodical way humans approached their task. They had turned warfare into performance art, broadcasting every moment to ensure that the entire galaxy could see exactly what humans did to those who harmed their children. The cheerful, almost friendly way human soldiers went about their work frightened aliens who had survived countless battles. Major Alex Stone had been recorded explaining Vorthak anatomy to his soldiers while dissecting a captured officer. He spoke like a medical professor teaching students, not like a warrior in combat. Ambassadors Dev called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from all 7 major species gathered in the Great Chamber where they had dismissed human concerns just months earlier. The atmosphere was very different now. "We must discuss the human situation immediately," Ambassador Zetev announced. "Their actions against the Vorthak Empire far exceed any reasonable definition of proportional response." The hegemony of Tal sent their most experienced diplomat, Ambassador Kelth. The Tal were known for their logical approach to galactic politics, but even Kelth seemed nervous as he spoke. "The humans claim they followed our legal precedents." Kelth, Soid. "Our legal experts have reviewed their actions. Technically, everything they did was justified under laws we ourselves established." The representative from the Crystalline Collective, a species that communicated through harmonic vibrations, created sounds of distress. "We cannot allow this precedent to stand. If every species responds to aggression with such overwhelming force, the galaxy will tear itself apart." Ambassador Zetev tried to maintain his diplomatic composure, but the footage from Vorthak space had shaken him deeply. "We must bring the humans before this council to answer for their actions." Director Helen Price appeared on the main display screen, her image transmitted from Earth. Behind her, the burning remains of the Vorthak homeworld were visible through a viewport. She looked calm and professional, as if she were attending a routine business meeting. "Director Price," Ambassador Stev began carefully, "the Council is deeply concerned about humanity's recent actions. Your response to Vorthak aggression seems excessive." Price tilted her head slightly, genuinely confused. "Excessive? We simply followed the legal framework this council established. The Vorthak declared war on humanity and systematically exterminated our civilians. We responded according to galactic law. The Altarian representative tried a different approach. But surely you understand that your methods were unnecessarily cruel. There must have been more humane ways to achieve your objectives." Price's expression did not change. "Humane? The Vorthak broadcast the torture of our children as entertainment. They forced human families to watch each other die slowly. We simply returned the education they provided." Legal expert Judge Patricia Murphy appeared beside Director Price on the screen. Patricia had spent months preparing for this moment, studying every Galactic Council decision from the past century. "If I may address the Council," Patricia said politely, "we have prepared a comprehensive legal brief. Every action humanity took was justified under precedents this council established." She began displaying documents and legal citations on screens throughout the chamber. Each one showed how the council had previously ruled in favor of aggressive species who claimed territorial rights over weaker civilizations. In the case of the Zelran expansion of 2387, this council ruled that resistance to lawful territorial claims constituted an act of war. In the Mandek incident of 2401, you established that civilian populations supporting military resistance were legitimate targets. Patricia continued for an hour, citing decision after decision where the council had favored strength over justice. Every legal justification they had used to ignore Vorthak atrocities against humans had been turned into a weapon. "The precedent is clear," Patricia concluded. "When a species declares war on another and targets civilians, The defending species has unlimited rights of retaliation under galactic law. The council members looked at each other in growing alarm. They had created these laws to maintain stability, but they had never imagined a species would apply them with such devastating thoroughness. Ambassador Stev tried one more approach. Director Price, surely you understand that your actions have consequences beyond the immediate conflict. Other species are now afraid of humanity. Price smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Good. Fear breeds respect. For 50 years we tried to earn respect through cooperation and peaceful behavior. You taught us that respect only comes from strength. Reports were already flooding in from across the galaxy. The hegemony of Tal had recalled all their trade vessels from human space. The Crystalline Collective had issued formal apologies for any misunderstandings that might have occurred. During recent negotiations, 3 smaller species had sent delegations to Earth begging for protection agreements. They offered to become human client states in exchange for security guarantees. They had seen what humans did to their enemies and wanted to ensure they never became targets. But the true message became clear when Admiral Morrison addressed the entire galaxy through every communication network simultaneously. His words were translated into thousands of languages and broadcast to every inhabited world. For 50 years we tried to be the peaceful neighbors you claimed to want, Morrison said. We followed your laws, respected your customs, and trusted in your justice. You taught us that weakness invites predation, and mercy is seen as vulnerability. He paused to let his words sink in across the galaxy. We are fast learners. The Vorthak Empire learned what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized. We hope this lesson will not need to be repeated. The former Vorthak territories had been reorganized with terrifying efficiency. Human occupation forces ruled, with mechanical precision that somehow felt more frightening than simple conquest would have been. The surviving Vorthak lived in cities that operated like clockwork. They were fed, housed, and employed in useful work. But they moved through their daily lives like robots, following patterns designed by human psychologists who understood their species better than they understood themselves. Visitors from other species reported that the former Vorthak worlds were the most orderly and productive in the galaxy. Crime had been eliminated. Efficiency was perfect. But something essential had been removed from the population, something that made them truly alive. The humans had not simply conquered the Vorthak. They had performed a surgical procedure on their entire civilization, removing the parts that might threaten human interests while leaving the useful components intact. Ambassador Sev received reports from his intelligence networks across the galaxy. Every major species was quietly reviewing their military capabilities and comparing them to what humans had demonstrated. The conclusion was always the same. Humanity possessed technology and organizational abilities that far exceeded anything the established powers had imagined. The galaxy had entered what historians would later call the Age of Human Caution. Trade. Routes that had operated freely for centuries now carefully avoided human space unless absolutely necessary. Diplomatic missions to Earth were staffed by each species' most experienced and careful ambassadors. Nobody wanted to accidentally offend the species that had casually eliminated the Vorthak Empire in less than a week. The final session of the Emergency Council meeting ended with a proposal for new galactic laws, specifically designed to prevent future conflicts with humanity. The irony was not lost on anyone present that these protections for human civilians were far more comprehensive than anything previously offered to other species. As the representatives departed, Ambassador Zitev remained in the empty chamber, staring at the displays that still showed footage from the former Vorthak Empire. He finally understood what his species had unleashed upon the galaxy. Humanity had kept their promise with a thoroughness that redefined what it meant to be human in the galactic community. The galaxy would never again mistake human civility for human weakness. 6 months after the fall of the Vorthak Empire, the galaxy had become a very different place. Trade ships that once moved freely between worlds now plotted their courses carefully to avoid human space unless absolutely necessary. Diplomats who had once treated humans as amusing junior partners now spoke in whispers about the species that had redefined galactic warfare. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council station toward his first formal session since the Vorthak campaign. His uniform was simple and clean, without the decorations that other species wore to show their importance. He did not need decorations. Everyone knew exactly who he was and what he represented. The chamber that had once buzzed with casual conversation between alien representatives fell completely silent when Morrison entered. Ambassador Stev, who had previously spoken with casual authority, now stumbled over his words when addressing the human delegation. Morrison took his seat at the table reserved for humanity. Around him, representatives from 7 alien species sat quietly, each one carefully avoiding direct eye contact. The atmosphere felt more like a funeral than a diplomatic meeting. "We are gathered today to discuss the proposed human accords," Ambassador Zatev announced. His musical voice sounded strained and tired. "These new laws are designed to prevent future conflicts and ensure galactic stability." The irony was not lost on Director Helen Price, who attended the meeting virtually from Earth. The protections for human civilians outlined in these new laws were far more comprehensive than anything the Council had ever offered to other species. Under the proposed human accords, any attack on human civilians would be considered an act of war against all humanity. The response would be immediate and unlimited. No species would be allowed to claim territorial rights over human-occupied worlds without explicit human consent. "These terms seem quite favorable to humanity," observed Ambassador Kelth from the hegemony of Tal. "What assurances can you give that humans will not abuse these protections?" Morrison looked directly at the Tal representative with calm eyes. "The same assurances you gave us when we asked for protection under existing galactic law. We will follow the legal framework exactly as written." The alien diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They remembered how humans had followed previous galactic laws with devastating precision. Price addressed the Council from her screen. "We want the same thing you want, Ambassador Kelth. Peace and stability. We have simply learned that peace requires strength and stability requires clear consequences for those who threaten it." While the diplomats talked, the real changes were happening in the former Vorthak territories. Captain Jake Morrison, the Admiral's younger brother, now served as governor of the former Vorthak homeworld. His title was Military Administrator, but everyone understood he held absolute power over the conquered territories. Jake stood on the observation deck of the administrative complex that had once been Emperor Vorth's palace. Below him, the capital city operated with mechanical precision that would have impressed any efficiency expert. The former Vorthak citizens moved through their daily routines like parts of a vast machine. They woke at designated times, reported to their assigned jobs, completed their tasks according to human-designed protocols, and returned to their homes exactly when scheduled. Nobody was killed. Nobody was physically tortured. Nobody was denied food, shelter, or medical care. But the Vorthak as they had once existed were disappearing generation by generation. Dr. Sandra White, the chief psychologist for the occupation forces, joined Jake on the observation deck. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had spent her career studying how to help people overcome trauma. Now she was applying that knowledge in reverse. "The rehabilitation programs are proceeding ahead of schedule," Dr. White reported. "The adult population has adapted to the new social structure with minimal resistance. The children are responding even better to the educational reforms." Jake nodded as he watched Vorthak children walking to school in perfect lines, their faces blank and obedient. "What about their cultural identity?" "Eliminated systematically," Dr. White replied without emotion. "We've removed all references to their previous military culture, their concepts of conquest and domination, and their celebration of violence. The new generation will grow up believing that cooperation and submission to authority are the highest virtues." The transformation was happening across all former Vorthak worlds. Human administrators had studied Vorthak society for decades, identifying every aspect of their culture that promoted aggression or independence. These elements were being surgically removed, while useful traits were enhanced. Former Vorthak warriors now worked in factories producing goods for human colonies. Their military traditions had been replaced with industrial efficiency programs. They competed to see who could assemble products fastest, channeling their aggressive instincts into harmless productivity contests. The results were disturbing to outside observers, but undeniably effective. Crime had been eliminated completely. Economic output had increased by 300%. The former Vorthak territories had become the most orderly and productive region in the galaxy. But visitors always left with a sense of unease they could not explain. Something essential had been removed from the population, something that made them truly alive rather than simply functional. The broader galaxy watched this transformation with growing fear. Species that had once considered themselves humanities, equals began to realize they might have been interacting with a predator that was simply choosing not to hunt. Ambassador Zetev requested a private meeting with Director Price to discuss these concerns. The conversation took place in a secure chamber with no recording devices present. Director Price, Stev began carefully. Many species are concerned about humanity's long-term intentions. Your treatment of the former Vorthak territories suggests capabilities we never suspected you possessed. Price looked at the alien diplomat with genuine curiosity. What exactly concerns you, Ambassador? We are providing former Vorthak citizens with safe, productive lives. Their standard of living has improved dramatically under human administration. But at what cost? Zetev asked. You have systematically destroyed their culture, their independence, their very identity as a species. They are becoming something different, something that serves human interests rather than their own. Price nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. We learned that technique from studying how the galaxy treated us. For 50 years, you shaped human behavior through your laws, your expectations, and your indifference to our suffering. We simply applied those lessons with proper efficiency. The meeting ended with Stev understanding that humanity had become whatever their environment required them to be. The galaxy had created this version of humanity through their own choices and actions. In the weeks that followed, 3 more species requested formal protection agreements with humanity. They offered to become client states in exchange for security guarantees, preferring voluntary submission to the risk of facing human justice. The Crystalline Collective went even further, proposing a complete merger of their territories with human space. They had calculated that cooperation with humanity offered better long-term survival prospects than independence. Director Price announced humanity's acceptance of these agreements during a galaxy-wide broadcast. Her message was simple and direct. We welcome our new partners, she said. Humanity has learned that strength and cooperation produce better results than weakness and conflict. We look forward to building a more stable and prosperous galaxy together. The final scene of humanity's transformation took place in Ambassador Stev's private chambers. He sat alone, studying reports from across the galaxy and trying to understand what his species had unleashed. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had demonstrated exactly what they were capable of when pushed beyond their limits. Every species now knew the price of mistaking human civility for human weakness. Stev realized that humanity's most terrifying trait was not their capacity for violence, but their ability to adapt and learn. They had become whatever their environment demanded, absorbing lessons from their enemies and applying them with devastating efficiency. The humans had kept their promise to the galaxy. They had learned to play by the rules that strength was the only language that mattered. They had become fluent in that language with a thoroughness that redefined galactic politics. As Stev prepared his final report to the Altarian Republic, he wrote, We taught humanity that mercy was weakness and cooperation was vulnerability. We showed them that only strength commanded respect. They learned these lessons perfectly. The galaxy must now live with the consequences of our teaching, yeah. Age of human caution had begun, and it would last for generations. The promise had been kept, and the galaxy would never forget the price of underestimating human determination. Humanity had finally found their place in the galactic community. They were no longer the weak newcomers seeking acceptance. They were the species that others feared to offend, respected for their strength, and approached with careful diplomacy. The promise made in anger had become the foundation of a new galactic order, one where human children would never again be considered acceptable targets for anyone's ambitions.